After the catastrophic attempt to build 30 homes on my inherited land, I thought the HOA might finally give up on trying to ruin my ranch, but Karen and her crew had other plans, and this time it involved my peaceful fishing lake. I had spent years restoring the small lake behind my property, stocking it with trout, bass, and even a few experimental catfish, and it had become the perfect escape for weekends. But one morning, I drove past the lake and noticed a chemical smell in the air. My heart sank when I saw the remnants of bleach containers strewn along the shoreline, and the water had turned an eerie shade of opaque green. Karen had personally organized volunteers to pour bleach into my fishing area, apparently to discourage unauthorized fishing, or some other HOA nonsense that didn't make any sense. I could see fish floating belly up, their scales reflecting the sunlight in a haunting way, and the smell of chlorine mixing with mud made me want to throw up. I immediately grabbed my phone, calling both the local environmental authority and my attorney to report chemical tampering and property damage. But I also realized that this was my chance to finally make Karen regret meddling with my land. The next day, I drafted a plan. Using my legal ownership of the entire lake and shoreline, I moved to purchase the adjoining property that contained the small outlet pond and a portion of the lake the HOA had been using for community access. The transfer went through faster than Karen could say, "I am HOA president," giving me legal control over the entire body of water, including the section where she and the HOA had been running their activities. Once ownership was finalized, I sent a certified letter to the HOA stating that all fishing, boating, and recreational use of the lake was now strictly private property and that trespassing would result in immediate legal action. Within hours, I installed a chain link barrier across the inlet, posted private property, NO entry signs, and set up a series of cameras to monitor any attempts to enter the water. Karen showed up the following weekend, expecting to see the lake as she had imagined it, open, accessible, and ready for her HOA games. Instead, she found the water locked off, her volunteers staring blankly at the new signage, and her kayaks trapped behind the gates. She pounded on the barrier screaming about illegal obstruction and community rights, while I calmly walked up in full sun hat and sunglasses, pointing out that the lake, bleach damage aside, now belonged entirely to me and that any further interference would be considered trespassing, vandalism, and harassment. She tried dialing 911, likely hoping the authorities would take her side, but when the dispatcher learned she was trespassing on private property, they promptly told her to stand down. Over the next week, environmental inspectors arrived to assess the damage caused by the bleach. While the fish population had been affected in the short term, I had enough legal documentation and property control to prevent any fines from falling on me, and Karen now faced her own fines for chemical dumping and water contamination. The HOA board scrambled to organize a cleanup, but because I now owned the pond and outlet, they could only watch helplessly as their lake privileges evaporated. I even took the opportunity to improve the area: aeration systems, a new dock for my exclusive use, and a small floating platform that I could use for fishing or sunbathing, completely inaccessible to outsiders. Karen continued to drive by, furious, occasionally stopping to glare at the water, but she could do nothing, legally, financially, and physically. The volunteers who once eagerly followed her now whispered among themselves about how dangerous it was to mess with my property. My lake, once again peaceful and thriving, became a private sanctuary. The trout swam freely, the bass hunted insects in the warm shallows, and the cats and goats lounged nearby, observing the pond with supreme judgment. I sat on my dock with a rod in hand, sipping iced tea, feeling complete satisfaction as Karen fumed from across the road. Every attempt she made to reclaim access or challenge my ownership bounced off her like a tennis ball against a concrete wall. The bleach, the destruction, the audacity, all nullified by property law, quick action, and a little creative maneuvering. From that point on, Karen's name became synonymous with failure among the neighborhood. A cautionary tale of what happens when you mess with a rancher who knows exactly what they own and isn't afraid to take control. The lake was mine, pristine, secure, and untouchable, and Karen learned that some things are simply beyond HOA interference, especially when you have decades of legal documentation and a touch of righteous revenge on your side.